Before we start this show, just a word from our sponsor, 20 by 20 Apparel. Founded in 2015, 20 by 20 Apparel brings original tributes to pro wrestling's classic arenas, moments, and events. They look to spotlight the bloopers, bleeps, and body slams along with the biggest, smallest, strangest, and strongest that pro wrestling has had to offer. Along with their awesome line of pro wrestling apparel, they do offer many services. In the world of wrestling, there are hundreds of shirts, promotions, flyers, social media accounts, and ads. Don't get lost in the sea of parody shirts and display fonts. They can provide professional graphic design services at a reasonable price. 20 by 20 also hand screen prints all the tees in-house. If you would like to discuss possible run of tees, posters, koozies, foam fingers, or whatever, drop them a line. Go to 20 by 20 Apparel. That's the number 20x, the number 20 apparel.com. Now, let's get to the show.
Fresh is the word.
I'm Jim Duggan, got long wood for plenty hoes. I keep it fresher than fresh, but you already know. You suckers bummy, I'm money, I got a ton of flows. My weed loud like a motherfucking thunder roll. Your shit quiet like you ballin' on a budget though. We see your kicks and we laugh and yellin' what are those. You see me shining like a suit on puffy. You know my grindin' shit is too strong, buddy. That's why the dude call money. I be stuntin' like it's nothing at all. Cause it's nothing to me, it's probably something to y'all. Trying to smoke like me, then come and fuck with your dog. Got a closet full of kicks, you can't cop it tomorrow. And I'm fresher than the freshest, you can tell it's in my essence. Bitch, you see the way I'm rapping, yes I do this shit to death. Until I'm running out of breath, or tell somebody cut a check. But either way you know it's fresh, and either way you know it's fresh. Fresh, we fresh. Fresh, fresh, goddammit, we fresh.
Welcome to the Fresh is the Word podcast. I'm your host, Kelly K. Fresh Frazier. And on Fresh is the Word, we like to deliver wisdom through great stories from the minds of bright creatives of pop culture. Through those stories, we like to dissect the journey of our guests and present actionable lessons and advice for our listeners, no matter what career or avenue of artistry they pursue. And before we get into this episode, I want to give a shout out to Knox Money, Bang Belushi, and Foulmouth for the theme music for Fresh is the Word. And if you would like to support the podcast, you can always go to freshisthepodcast.com and just share any of the links for any of the episodes on any of your social media platforms. And also, you can subscribe to Fresh is the Word pretty much anywhere that podcasts are streamed. And that includes Apple Podcast, Spotify, Stitcher Radio, pretty much everywhere. And please rate and review, especially on Apple Podcasts. It will definitely help out the show. If you want to contact me, you can always reach me by email at djkfresh@gmail.com. Or you can follow me on Twitter and Instagram at KFresh is the word, and on Facebook at facebook.com/KFresh. And you can also follow Fresh is the Word on Twitter at Fresh is the Word, and that's is with an IZ, Instagram at Fresh is the Word Podcast, and Facebook at facebook.com/Fresh is the Podcast. And this is episode 135, and this episode is a two-parter. First, with comic book horror author Dirk Manning, known for such titles as Nightmare World, Tales of Mystery, and Twisted's Haunted Highlands, recorded at this year's C2E2 convention in Chicago. We had a quick chat about his current Kickstarter campaign for the superhero comic Hope, co-created with Kaylin Smith, who we heard back on episode 131, and being released through SourcePoint Press. And after my talk with Dirk, we get into my interview with the editor-in-chief of SourcePoint Press, Travis McIntire. And during my chat with Travis, we talk about all the big things in store at SourcePoint Press in 2019. Hope, Floppy Cop, the Rotten Tail movie, and Haunted Highlands. Along with their early history, doing conventions, what they look for in creators they want to work with, and the audience they try to connect with. All right, first off, let's get into my interview with Dirk Manning, recorded from this year's C2E2 convention in Chicago. All right, we're here at C2E2 with Dirk Manning.
Hi. Say how long I've been waiting here.
Yeah. So for those of you that aren't here at C2E2 with us, we got the introduction done, and Kelly's been now waiting for a mere 25 minutes to get to this part of the interview because it is C2E2, it is hopping, it is banging, it is popping, it is locking, it is polka dotting, it is nonstop.
Off the hook.
It's off the hook. We're talking very quickly because things are probably going to get very chaotic again fast.
Dirk is like a very popular person, you know. He always is.
Well, this is my 10th year at the show, so if people don't want to come see me by now, I guess I'm doing something wrong.
Right. Okay, so we're in the middle of the Hope Kickstarter.
Yes.
It's gone way over the goal. We're hitting stretch goals.
5 unlocked so far.
And how you feel about that, you know?
Oh, it's just amazing. You know, for the fact that after being known as a horror guy, and now to be doing a book that is a book about a superhero, for people still to say, you know what, we trust the quality of the Dirk Manning work, we're in. You know, they're in blind. Some people got access to the first issue in advance. They know what an emotional gut punch this book is.
Right.
A lot of people do not. And it's just really flattering. You know, we've unlocked 5 stretch goals so far. To be working with the Kaylin Smith, who's amazing and posing over there. You can't see it in Radio Land, but she is posing.
Right.
She like flexed. She'd like oh my God. Those 22 millimeter pythons just jumped right out.
She loves being right next to you, doesn't she?
You can't imagine the joy that it brings both of us to, for 4 weeks in a row, to be just tabling next to each other, and it's just joyous.
How's the tour going?
It's just joyous as she looks at me, and I just, help me.
She has the best faces
The best faces in comics. Yeah.
Right.
That's very expressionate. Yeah, it's a twitch at this point.
Okay, you have a lot of work that is, you know, from the horror genre.
Yes.
But you say that Hope, which is a comic book, superhero comic book, very vibrant.
Yes.
That is scarier than that.
Absolutely. You know? A lot of people got a chance to read the first issue of Hope last year. We did a self-published version before we got picked up by Source Point Press. The reaction was universally at the end of the first issue, oh my God. They're like, and then when's the next one? It's a very terrifying book. It's about parenting. It's about motherhood. It's about a lot of things, you know, and I'm really excited for people to get to see the whole volume and read the book. You know, you can be either back to Kickstarter, get the whole volume. You'll get a Kickstarter exclusive hardcover, or the full first issue drops from Source Point Press on Free Comic Book Day, May 4th. So for you Star Wars fans, May 4th, you get A New Hope. Yeah, see what we did there?
Crazy,
I wish I was the one that came up with that, but I didn't, but it still works.
How does Hope sort of differ than your typical superhero?
You know, I tell people it's a book about a superhero. It's not a superhero book.
Right.
And it's a difference I think is going to become very obvious what I mean as people read it. But it's a book about a woman who moonlights as a superhero. And what happens when some very unexpected events unfold in her life that really change the trajectory of everything she was doing. To say more is to spoil, but it's a very character-driven book. It's very intense. I think people that like works of mine, like Tales of Mystery, which kind of have more of a strong, flawed character, or people who are fans of Kaylin Smith's books like Plume, are going to find a lot to love in this series.
How does your background doing horror fit into this book? What part of that of your life doing those books fits into Hope?
I've always said that good horror answers the question, what would you do if?
Right.
Hope very much answers that question of what would you do if. Within the first 5 pages, the if happens. And we get to explore that topic through the lens of a superhero, and how some villains can't be punched, and how I don't want to say, I'm trying to be real careful, but it's pretty intense. That's all I can really say.
A lot of superheroes sort of get mixed feelings from like the general public within the story.
Mm-hmm.
Why is that?
You know, I think there's a lot to be said for the idea of being a superhero, and basically, imagine a world where superheroes existed, and you have people that can knock down buildings, you have people that can fly, you have people that can teleport, you have people that can shoot lasers out of their eyes. They're walking weapons.
Right.
Mark Miller, who wrote Civil War, one time used this great analogy about, imagine someone walking down the street with an AK-47 and a hockey mask on and saying it's okay, I'm a superhero.
Oh, yeah.
No, that's not okay. That's not okay at all. You know, well, some people might argue it is okay, but I mean, it's just saying it's okay, I'm a good guy, does not automatically alleviate any of my concern about the fact that someone would have weapons like that or powers like that. Hope in the book is a fairly well-liked ultra or superhero in the book, but that's not going to be what the book is about if she's well-liked or not. It's going to rather be about what happens when her life takes a very dramatic and unexpected turn, and how she reacts, how those around her react, how society reacts, how the villains react. It's going to be pretty intense.
What do you hope your readers get out of reading Hope, and how does it fit in with today's real-life culture?
Oh, my gosh. You know, we're seeing such an awareness and a resurgence of paying attention to things like gender roles and women's rights and society and how we view women in society and things like that. I think this fits into that zeitgeist very nicely. You know, a buddy of mine just watched Captain Marvel, the movie, and said what he liked about it most is they never drew extra attention to the fact that Captain Marvel was a woman.
Right.
And that was such an interesting comment. And as much as I like about it, the fact that he's absolutely right, it didn't draw attention. She didn't have a male love interest. She wasn't saved by a guy, you know. But the fact now that people are recognizing that we can do that is also like, well, finally. Right. Yeah, Hope is a character. She happens to be female. We address that. We address her life as a woman. You know, Kaylin Smith is a woman. Our editor, Heather Antos, is a woman. I have many strong women in my life that I'm very grateful are there and have been there. But that we can now look at things through that lens about there are differences, and what is the differences, and how do people view things? Right. Is I think going to be very relevant moving forward.
How did working with Kaylin and Heather sort of improve this book from a woman's perspective?
You'd have to ask them.
I did ask her.
Yeah. Oh, what did she say? I'll tell you if I agree.
She said there was like a few things she had to tell you, like, okay, a woman really wouldn't do that.
Yeah. You know, and that's fair, right? You know, no, it was tweaks. I like working with those two on the book because there's just questions about would someone react that way or things like that. You know, obviously I'm writing a female character through a male lens, but I've written a lot of other female characters before. I've written a lot of characters that are not like me, right? In a lot of ways, but it's good to have that perspective of two very strong creators to balance that out and look at, you know, when we're getting into issues about specifically how would a woman like Hope react to the situation. It's good to have two other strong women on your team to evaluate. Maybe not. And then sometimes I push back and say, I think she maybe would. And, you know, but then we work that out. But by and large, I mean, I think we've all come to terms with everything throughout the book, and their insight has been invaluable.
Have you learned anything writing a woman character?
I mean, I've written women characters a lot throughout my career. Never at the forefront as much as in this book, obviously. But it's one of these things where, again, kind of like some of the stuff that Kaylin will say or that Heather will say about, oh, well, you know, it looks to me like this.
Right.
And maybe there'll be an interaction or something like that. They're like, well, it looks to me kind of like this is happening. I'm like, oh, I never considered it that way. You know, they kind of mess with me, oh, because you're a guy. You know, I'm like, oh. But there's also a truth to that, too. It's like, you're right. You know, I try to be very sensitive to things, very open-minded. I try to be very empathic about such things. But still, there's some things that I'm going to see through a middle-age-ish white guy lens, right? No matter what. That's what I am. So it's definitely been enlightening sometimes to be able to view things from that different perspective. And I think by and large with Hope, I mean, we are using that lens. And but, again, it's nice to get that feedback, too, of just something that may have been a blind spot for me.
Right. Any final thoughts that you want to talk about with the Hope?
Yeah, we've unlocked 5 stretch goals so far on Kickstarter. Everyone gets a Kickstarter exclusive hardcover. If you're going to get the trade paperback down the road, get the hardcover now. You pledge, you get the book for free, you're automatically upgraded to a Kickstarter exclusive hardcover. Go to Kickstarter, search Hope Comic. There's a beautiful trailer that Kaylin did on there. You can check everything out, and and go from there. It'll be worth your time. It'll be a series of emotional gut punches. Fair warning.
So that was my interview with Dirk Manning, recorded at the C2E2 convention in Chicago. I had a blast at C2E2, met so many people that were already on the podcast, met so many people that hope to have on future episodes of the podcast. It was just a really fun vibe. Go ahead and go online and support that Hope Kickstarter from Dirk Manning and Kaylin Smith and Source Point Press. I have the first issue. It's amazing, and I can't wait to read more, and I can't wait to get the whole Kickstarter package that I pledged for. So let's get into the interview now with Travis McIntire, the editor-in-chief of Source Point Press. The way that I heard about you guys, Source Point Press, was because of the Twisted Haunted Highons comic book. I've been a long-time Twisted fan. Their comic book kind of, got me into really, wanting to learn more about, meet other creatives and learn more about, that sort of industry. And ever since the first Astronomicon last year, I started going to more and more comic book conventions, going to the comic book store much more, and then I kind of turned that part into my onto my podcast, and I've interviewed a bunch of great comic book creators, but you guys are doing a lot of things. Now you guys definitely expanding more to more into other things than you were before. Kind of talk about sort of like the state of Source Point Press right now and where it's kind of going this year.
So this year, starting in January, has kind of been a big transition year for us. So we've been around for about 5 years. For the first 3 years, we were sort of building, gathering talent books, and we were just sort of self-distributing and kind of grinding the convention scene. We were touring like a band does. And then, the beginning of last year, we got international distribution through Diamond and Ingram, which are two book distributors. And we were doing 3 books a month. So we were distributing 3 books a month. And that really helped kind of solidify our cash flow as a company, along with, our constant touring of convention after convention after convention, just kind of beating the streets with it. And then starting in September, we've upped to 10 books a month. So now we're doing 10 books a month, which has been pretty hectic, but so far so good, But we've kind of pushed into, where we're kind of comfortably sitting at the top of the small press heap right now.
Right. Sort of the progression of the company. Do you kind of lend that towards where you're going this year, in regards to a vision that you have are you letting a lot of the material and some of the opportunities that kind of come your way with the creators that you work with sort of help with the progression of where the company goes next?
That's an interesting question. I honestly think that it's a little bit of both. I think that I have like a basic. It started off where I had to make a 3-year plan, basically, to keep my wife from murdering me. This is true. This is exactly how it went down. It was 3 years ago. We were doing all these conventions, and I've got 2 small kids. I've got right now they're 6 and 4, but when we first started doing this real heavily, they were like 3 and 1.
Right.
And so, she was like, I can't do this forever. I know you're trying to build something, and I respect that, and I want to see you succeed, but we can't do it this way forever. So I came up with a plan that was like, look, I'm going to do this. I'm going to do this. This is what we're going to invest into it. These are the steps that I'm going to take. The goal of that was to get to the point where it's like, okay, we need to be big enough and have enough titles and enough creators who are kind of, fit in into what we're doing. You know, if they have the same, it's similar to how M&E operates. You
Right.
know, it's not just like, well, can we find some new talent? It's, can we find the right talent who fits, who has the same flavor as us, you know, who also wants to grind like we grind.
Right.
But to have enough people to where I could go from doing, you know, because I was doing 40 some shows a year, so almost every single weekend.
Yeah.
So that I could cut back. So last year, you know, I cut back to around, the low 30s, and this year I'm hoping to cut back to a little bit below 20 personally. So that, you know, that was sort of the first plan, is like, can we get to this point where we have enough personnel and enough, you know, cash flow that I can sort of step back and we have enough people to keep it rolling. And we got there. And then it's one of these things where, you know, as you grow, different opportunities present themselves, and you kind of look at your roster and what you have and the types of book people are talking about and the types of books people are bringing you, and you're just trying to figure out what fits where and what makes sense. So yeah, every once in a while I'll be like, we have an opportunity here. We need to fill this slot. Can I find a book that fills that slot? Or you know, I've got these are the titles that we have. These are what's going well for us. How do we market them a little bit better now that we have the ability? Now that we have, so, you know, we have a much bigger microphone now.
Right.
Megaphone is a better idea. So, you know, taking stuff that we have in the pipeline, how do we push it out there more now?
What was some of the first titles that seemed successful enough to where you just thought in your mind, hey, this plan that I have might actually work?
The first time, I think that me and Josh Werner, who is the current art director for the company, he's one of the founders. I think the first time where we kind of looked at each other and were like, this might work, was when we released the very first issue of Monstrous at a Michigan convention about 3 years ago. And it was one of our first books that we had signed that was not like us, you know, that wasn't part of our little, you know, group of us, basically kind of self-publishing. It was our first outside thing. And it, you know, it sold, I think at that very first little show, a little 2-day thing, it sold 200 copies.
Okay.
Which, you know, that's not a big deal, you know, by any stretch of the imagination. It was, but that was the first time we were like, okay, cool. This hit a chord. People really responded to it. They responded to it by buying it. And we turned a nice chunk of profit on that book. You know, and now Monstrous is like a 16-issue long series, and it comes out monthly, you know, through Diamond comic shops all over.
Right. And I like you were talking about, you're doing all these conventions, and by now it's just like you guys are almost like a staple of the conventions, you know, around here in this, you know, region. Sure. You know, what's your idea about what you want to put out, you know, to how you want to present yourself at these conventions to the people that are there, you know, whether or not they already know who you guys are or not?
We want to, so because it kind of started off as one thing, you know, so we're very proud of being, you know, our roots were, you know, Northern Detroit is where we kind of started the company. And we're very proud of that. And we also think that the Detroit comic scene, the Michigan comic scene, the Midwest comic scene is the strongest scene of anywhere we've been, and we've been everywhere. You know, we do San Diego, we do New York City, we do everything.
Yeah.
So we're very proud of that. We're very proud to be from here, and we're very proud to represent that, and we're very proud to be one of the bigger and more, you know, and one of the biggest and most probably recognizable publishers in that scene. And so we try really hard, you know, we do in the Midwest, we do everything from the biggest shows to the littlest ones,
Yeah.
and we try to bring something special to all of those shows because this is our place and we want it to be awesome. And we want people, whether they're coming to a small Fantasticon in Fort Wayne, Indiana, or they're going to C2E2 in Chicago, we want them to be like, that was cool, man. And I got to talk to, people that are in the industry and know what they're doing, which is why we continually do, portfolio reviews and take pitches and things at the table at every show we go to. We almost always send someone who has the authority to do that. So that's important to us, and that's something we try to put out, is that this is where we're from. We work with a lot of people from this region. At the same time, we kind of balance that because we have grown so much. We're a huge place at Book Expo in New York City. We're main floor at San Diego. We're in Canada. I leave for Dublin, Ireland tomorrow morning. So, we try to. It's a weird line to walk, honestly. Right. Because we started off, we were so based here. This is our area. We're the Michigan publisher. I mean, I don't know if you know this, but before we actually kind of got SourcePoint really rolling, we were doing a thing called the Michigan Comics Collective, which was a nonprofit. And that's kind of how I learned how to publish a book, was building that and going through that. And that was all Michigan only talent. That whole idea was we were going to do these books that were completely made in Michigan all the way up to being printed in Michigan.
Right.
So we were basically kind of big homers,
Right. What I've always noticed about the SourcePoint Press booth at any Comic-Con is that you guys are having a lot of fun. It's always very welcoming. How important is it to have that sort of fun vibe at your booth?
I think it's really important. I think that people respond to a couple of things. One, they respond to the hustle. They want. I think people want to. When they see something that looks cool, that's big, that's a major part of the show, that makes them want to go and look at it and be a part of it.
Yeah.
And when they walk up to that thing and those people are open and welcoming and like, hey, come here, let me tell you about this, let me get you in on this, I think that it makes putting paper in people's hands a lot easier.
Right.
We are not really big on, kind of being the sort of prototypical standoffish comic artist trope. We also really don't believe in, let's say you're a huge fan of Batman, right?
Yeah.
You're gonna go to the store and you're gonna buy Batman comics because you love Batman. Nothing wrong with that. It's great. That's wonderful. I think that's perfect. But there's not a lot of point in me spending a ton of effort and time trying to convince you to give your $4 to me instead, because I don't publish Batman, So what we try to do is we really try to go after people who are maybe not reading comics now, but could be, or who are maybe already a little bit interested in something different, or they're already into small press stuff, or they're already into independent stuff, things like that. And I think a big part of that scene conventions have evolved a lot over the past maybe 10 years, at least as long as I've been going to them, to where they have moved away from being purely comic and moved into being these pop culture experiences.
Yeah.
And I think a lot of comic purists sort of hate that. But for me, I think it's great because I want there to be wrestlers and people from TV shows. I want different types of fandom. You know, I want Harry Potter fans and people who've never read a Marvel or DC book, or whatever, like somebody who's there because they want to get so and so's autograph because they're fans of Lord of the Rings or whatever it is. I don't care. I want that broad cross section of fandom because I want the opportunity to try to talk to those people and show them what we're making and see if it could be something that's theirs.
Right.
And I think that that's one of the things that has sort of set us apart and helped us have the success that we've had, and that we never looked at it in this terms of like, okay, so, the direct comic market is 1.8 million people going to a store in the United States on every Wednesday, and 78% of that market's owned by Marvel and DC, and the rest of it's chopped up from Image and Dark Horse and Dynamite and IDW and everybody else, and you got to try to get your footprint in there. I've never really gone after that. That's never really been our thing. Our thing was like, nah, we'll try to we're going to try to build our own market. We're going to find people who are already disposed to give our stuff a chance and give it a read. And kind of to circle this all the way back, I think that's part of the reason that a show like Astronomicon is so successful for us. Because you're getting a very different cross-section of people.
Right.
And also I've found that like Twisted fans and M&E fans are very hustle driven. So
definitely.
If you're into a thing, they get excited about it too, and then pretty soon they're buying everything you have. So it's a good fit, honestly.
Right. You were kind of talking about like the way that these conventions have progressed into sort of full on pop culture events. Do you feel like it's easier to talk to and even maybe sell your product to a casual pop culture fan that might be just there to get their picture taken with some horror movie legend as compared to a comic book purist?
What was that? I didn't catch quite what you.
What I was saying was, do you find it easier to connect with the people at a convention who maybe that are just like a casual comic book reader that is just there for the, maybe get their picture taken with a horror flick legend in comparison to like the comic book purists?
Yeah, I feel like, we almost kind of, the answer to your question is absolutely. Absolutely. There is, you can kind of, you do enough of these, you can kind of tell based on what people are carrying in their hands, whether or not you're going to have a chance of them picking up your book. It's not always true, obviously. Right. But if you have an older gentleman who is like wandering by and he's got a stack of Uncanny X-Men from the 80s, you probably are not going to get that sale. This is a guy this is what he's into, this is what he does. Nothing wrong with it. That's awesome shit, I'm not criticizing it at all, but you're not going to get that sale. Now on the other hand, if you have an older male walks by and he's got a whole bunch of like old issues of Tales from the Crypt in his hand or something like that, chances are we'll get him. We'll get somebody who's into that or into old pulp or things like that. But yeah, we generally, the guys who are like what I would call long box miners or are more hardcore into like, hunting down silver and Bronze Age keys and stuff like that. That isn't really our audience. I'm not at all against them. Full disclosure, I was kind of a hardcore collector of that stuff. A lot of the money that I spent to fund Source Point the first 2 years were because I sold my comic book collection. And I had a big collection of silver, all the, of like 1960s era Marvel. So I get it. I totally understand. I think it's a great hobby. But those people tend to not be who we're looking for. Whereas if you have somebody who is, they're there and they're excited because it's a horror show and they want to meet Kane Hodder and get a picture of him choking them, that's perfect, man, because we work with Adam Green and we do the Holliston book and Kane Hodder is in one of those comics. We can get those fans.
Right. You mentioned earlier how that, at these conventions, you'll do some, you'll look at people's work if they show it to you guys. What is like when a creator goes, like an upcoming creator goes to conventions to sort of seek some advice from you guys or any creator that might be in Artist Alley? What are sort of the do's and don'ts that they should really stick to when presenting their own creations?
Yeah, so for us, we ultimately had to stop taking digital submissions because we were just getting inundated with them, and we don't have that many people who, I mean, there's 3 of us basically who work for SourcePoint full time.
Right.
We just didn't have time for it. So what we did is we were like, look, if you want to submit to us, we're at a show all the time. Come find us. Because we kind of look at it like, look, put a little effort into it,
Oh yeah, definitely.
I can tell you this: if you come up to me and you have made a thing, you've made something with your hands, I don't care if it's something that you printed at a state and stapled it together. But if you made something and you're giving it to me for me to take home and read, I will read it. I really feel like there's a lot to be said for taking the time to try to craft something, even if you do a bad job, like even if it's terrible.
Right.
You saw something through to the end. Because that tells me something about you right off the bat, because comics is hard and it's a real grind, and oftentimes there's very little money, or it takes a long time to get to the money, and it's slow. And so we look at the creator of a book is at least as much as we look at the story and the art, at least as much. Like if you gave me something and I was like, this is really good, the art looks good, the story is interesting, I think this could be a good fit. The next thing I'm going to do is I'm going to start looking at you. I'm going to look at your social media. I don't care how many followers you have or how big a deal you are, but I want to see how are you engaging with the people that you are engaging with. Are you talking about your work? Do they seem interested in it? Are you interested in other people's work? Are you engaging with them? Do you seem like you have the right attitude to do this? Are you driven to do this? So if you bring me something that you made, even if you didn't have any money to do it, and you did it completely on the cheap, that goes a long way with me, because it's showing that you're trying to finish a thing. You're trying to get a thing to the point where it's like, hey, this is whatever it is, whatever level you're capable of doing it at, you did that. So that kind of stuff will get me to read your stuff. All that being said, that's really more for somebody who's like, I'm trying to make a book. If you are trying to get a like page rate type work as an artist, and so you want us to do a portfolio review, the best way to do that is to like show up in the morning and ask about available times and set an appointment for it.
Right. And I think
a lot of the big publishers, they kind of like will have like set times during every day, and people come and they line up and all that kind of stuff. I don't think we're big enough to where we need to do that. I mean, at like a huge show, I'll have a ton of them, but at little shows, you'll have 1 or 2 people will sometimes come and want you to look at their stuff. But I do try to give everybody time. I try to give everybody some of my time and actually look at their work and give them what, in my opinion, are where they need to go. to get to the next level, to get to where someone's going to write them a check for their art. And we have hired 2 artists in the past year from portfolio reviews. So it's a possible thing. It happens. But I think that the best way is to come right off the bat, early in the morning, walk up and say, hey, I'd like to get in a time to do a portfolio review. What time would be best? And then let me set an appointment. I think that's the best way to do that.
And yeah, I think in kind of extending on what you just described, ultimately when you actually bring anybody into the fold of SourcePoint Press to do some work, what are the type of qualities you're looking for in a person?
Yeah, probably one is you gotta have a little bit of talent. You gotta have a little bit of talent, but you gotta have a lot of drive.
Right.
More than anything, you gotta have a lot of drive. 'Cause like I said, it's not easy, and SourcePoint is a very tight knit group. We're on the road. Like I said, tomorrow I'm driving to Detroit. I pick up Casey. We're flying to Dublin together. I have 3 other teams operating this weekend doing 3 other shows. So we're together all the time, running around. So you have to be driven. You have to be able to, kind of put the time in. We're not unreasonable. We it's not like we put in the contract, you must do this many. You must do this many or whatever, because people have different lives. Some people have this personal life that it precludes them from doing that. Fine, no problem. Find your spot. Find the thing you can do that fits in. Find the way that you can market your stuff. And I think that's probably one of the main things, is that we try to find people who are driven to get out there and do it. They understand that this is about building a fan base one person at a time, one interaction at a time, until you get to where you're like, oh, I've got 100 people buying one thing I do a year. And then the next year I've got 500 people buying 2 things I do every year. And the year after that, I've got 1,500 people buying 3 things. Well, at that point, you got yourself a part-time job, And then maybe the year after that, you've got 3,000 people buying 3 things that you do every single year. And now you're probably making 40 grand a year, on your creative output. So, I want people who understand that that's the goal here. And it's something that you build brick by brick. It's not something where you show up with here's my piece of brilliance and it's going to take off like a rocket. I want people who are like, no, I'm here to build the house,
This year, you guys got a lot of great things coming up. 2019. There's Hope. There's Haunted Highons. There's the Rotten Tail trade with the movie coming out. Kind of talk about some of these big, really interesting and big projects that you guys got coming out in 2019.
Yeah, man. This is going to be a big year. So the first thing you mentioned, Hope, which actually, so Hope's going to be really interesting. One, it's our first free comic book day book. So if you don't know what free comic book day is, it's the first Saturday in May. Just about every comic book store in the world does this event, free comic book day, where you can go in and you get, these certain comics are free. And so what we did is the Hope #1 is going to be a free book. And it's not like a partial issue. It's not a number 0. It's not an anthology. It's the full-on real issue #1 is going to be the free book. So that's out there happening. And then in May, we're actually soliciting #2. So if people pick up #1 for free, they read it, they can immediately order #2 from, their local store. And then at the same time, we're doing that with Dirk and Kaylin, who have both respectively been, record-breaking, crowdfunding creators. So tomorrow we're launching a Kickstarter that is going to be the collected version of all 6 issues but it'll be just an exclusive version that's going to come out only through the campaign. So we're kind of trying to sort of walk a fine line between those two worlds, and hopefully please two different types of fan bases. So that's going to be, I think, really interesting, and I think it's going to be successful because the product is really good, the book is awesome, the creators are great, and we're putting out some really fun stuff that I think is going to appeal to the kind of the hardcore fans of Caitlin and Dirk, and more casual fans who are just sort of discovering us for the first time.
Right.
Rotten Tail is one of our earliest graphic novels, and one of our very first graphic novels to ever sell out and go into a second printing. It's a horror comedy about a laboratory scientist who gets bitten by a mutant bunny and turns into a murderous Easter bunny. It's super silly, super over the top. We went into principal photography in 2017 on that, and then went into post in 2018, and spent most of the year. It's a slow, hard process. Making that movie aged me 20 years, man. But we made, in conjunction with a lot of partners and different producers, we made our first feature film, and it actually hits theaters on the 12th. But on April 4th, which is a Thursday, there's going to be the premiere event is going to be in Detroit.
Nice.
So I can't announce what theater it's going to be at just yet, because we haven't gotten all our I's crossed and our T's dotted, so to speak. But it's going to be coming soon. And the cool thing with that is that Twisted actually did a lot of the soundtrack for Rotten Tail.
Okay, awesome.
So we're going to have, I think the guys are going to come out, do a little appearance, watch the movie with us, hopefully like it, hopefully laugh. I did the commentary track just a couple days ago, and I was laughing my ass off. I was so happy because I hadn't seen it in full since before the color correction and the sound correction.
Yeah.
And I tell you what, man, it is astonishing when you kind of watch a movie go through all the stages, because you just you see the assembly cut and you're just like, oh God, what have we done? and then it goes through all the steps and it starts getting color corrected, and the sound mix starts coming together, and you're like, oh, this isn't so bad. And then you watch the final version, I was just like, holy shit, we made a movie, man.
Oh,
this looks like a real movie. Maybe we're not going to be bankrupt after all. Maybe not. We'll see.
Right.
And I think we're going to do a little, a really limited edition, CD of the soundtrack. Maybe 500 copies or something. Just kind of a for fun thing.
Right.
With Twisted and the guys. So those are the Rotten Tail thing right now is probably the thing that's taking up, still managing to take up the most of my time.
Yeah.
And then of course the Darkness Rises miniseries with Twisted is it's. I was, to be 100% honest, when this was first brought to me, and I love the guys, I love George. When this was first brought to me, I was like, oh, come on, man. I don't want to do a band comic, Kiss did that in the 90s and it sucked. I don't want to do a band comic. But Dirk was writing it, and I like his work usually, and Mariana's a great artist, and they kind of kept on me for a couple of weeks. And and then the same thing with George. He kind of had to be convinced a little bit to come with us, and then we did it. We did that first one shot, and the surprising thing was that it was based on these guys and the characters that they are, But the comic itself was actually funny. It was fun, and it was funny, and it had a real Scooby-Doo vibe. And
yeah,
and I think it was, I thought it was this is a really readable thing. People could read this and enjoy it and have never listened to Twisted before, and still kind of get the vibe of who these guys are and what they're about. And I think Darkness Rises is that even more so.
Right.
I think that it's the biggest challenge we're going to have with it. Because to be honest, like selling it is not hard. It's very easy. I mean, Twisted fans are ravenous,
Yeah.
I mean, we like they'll buy the books, like they'll buy them and check them out and love them and all that. But you kind of, as a publisher, you kind of want to try to like push past that a little bit and like be like, okay, cool, that's great, and I'm so grateful for this amazing fan base, but can we get some of the normies to check this out too? And that's sort of the challenge that we're having is that's why we went with the Eastman cover, because we were trying to get a big name to get people to, like, people in the comics world to be like, what? Kevin Eastman, Twisted, why? And like look at it and pick it up and read a few pages and realize, like, actually this is pretty clever, this is funny, this is a good comic. It's not just like a chintzy band tie-in thing. This is a good comic. This is a good Scooby-Doo funny horror mystery. And that is, we're trying to market it that way. And we're having Twisted's coming to C2E2 for a signing on the Saturday. So we're putting in a lot of effort to kind of try to get more exposure for the book and for them and into the mainstream comic audience. And I hope, I don't have unrealistic expectations. Like, this is not going to start selling Spider-Man numbers or anything, but
right.
I really I want people to, like, Twisted fans are going to get it, and they're going to be like, this is great, I love this, awesome. But I want to get some of the, the run of the mill comic fans to be like, what is this thing? And then read it and realize this is pretty cool. And if those people turn around and start checking out Twisted for the first time ever, that's a big win,
Right, definitely. Another title that you guys are going to be working with that I really love is Floppy Cop.
Floppy Cop?
Yeah.
Yeah, Floppy Cop's so weird, man. It's so weird. I just hope that book finds the appropriate niche. It's really funny, but the art is very whimsical, but it is not a kid's book. And then on top of that, you have Ray Fosgett, who, he's the famous My Little Ponies artist, and he works for Disney, and he's quintessential children's cartoonist, is doing the covers. And so this book exists in this weird niche, and I hope that it finds its niche, and I hope enough people read it and realize how clever it is and how funny it is and how different it is. But yeah, that is let's see, I think number 2 is being solicited right now, and I think number 2 is the March solicitation. Yeah.
Yes.
So that means we'll be getting the order numbers for number 1 here. I don't know, 8 days or so, 10 days maybe.
Right.
So we'll find out. We'll find out how it did. I mean, it does great at conventions. Like, it kills at conventions if you can get people to check it out and tell them about it. It kills.
Right. That's how I came about it. I saw. That's how. I bought it at one of the conventions. I think Dirk told me to go talk with Jay, and then he showed me it, and I'm like, dude, this is hilarious. And I had to buy. No, actually, I think I bought it from Dan Doherty, actually, and he was telling me about it, and I'm like, dude, I have to buy this. This is hilarious.
It is extremely funny.
What are you most excited about, with everything coming up with Source Point Press?
I mean, there's a ton of things that I'm really excited about, but the number one thing is getting Rotten Tail wrapped. I mean, that thing has been like all consuming for 2 years, and not to put too fine a point on it, but I got like I've got all my retirement is wrapped up into that movie. Like it has a lot of my money and a lot of my soul in it. And I didn't make it to get rich at all. I made it, to have made a movie. I made it to have made a movie and to show that we could make a movie and that we could make this happen and we could bring in the partners we needed. And it was just a massive amount of work and like a huge team effort. I mean, so many people. I mean, I'm not even going to say any names because then I'll just spend the next hour having to say names. But so many had to come together to make this thing happen. And now we're like 5 weeks away from actually 4 weeks away now from actually like sitting in a movie theater with a bunch of people, and they're going to be able to watch it on a big screen, and then a week after that, it's going to release, I mean, it's a small B horror movie, so it's not going to be in like 3,000 theaters, but it's releasing nationally, So again, I think that for the vast majority of, the American movie watching audience, they're going to be like, this is a stupid movie. And I have been made actively dumber by watching it. But if you are already the type of person that thinks it's like a murderous Easter bunny sounds a little bit funny, then you are going to like this movie. And I'm proud of it. I mean, it's silly and it's over the top and it's bloody and it's ridiculous, but that's what I like. I like that stuff. So I'm proud of it. I think it's great. And I just can't wait for it to be out and being watched and not have it be this thing that's like, yep, we're still working on it. Yep, Rotten Tail's still coming. Yep, it's it's in post. Yep, it's this part of the process took 3 months. Well, it could have taken 1 month. Could have, if I'd had 10 times more money, it probably would have. But I didn't. So it took 3 months to do this. So just having it wrap, having it be done, that's I think the thing I'm looking forward to the most. Right. Kind of letting out a big breath.
I bet you are. I like to ask this question to everybody I'm interviewing. Like, what's something like a nugget of knowledge from your life and career that anybody listening to this, no matter what sort of avenue of artistry that they're in, could sort of project into their own life?
I think that, man, I mean, it's gonna sound like bad advice. It's gonna sound like bad advice, but I would say that if you really want to do a thing, you can't be afraid to spend money and time trying to make that thing happen. If you want a thing to become a job, you have to treat it like it's a job. And if you want a thing to be your business, you got to treat it like it's your business. And that means making an investment into it. And sometimes that investment means money, and sometimes that investment means a ton of your time. And you can't be afraid to do that. If you're happy doing a thing and it being a hobby for you, then more power to you, and that's great. But if you really want to try to take the next step, you have to be willing to kind of take a little bit of risk.
And I always like to end my interviews with the same question, and I already gave it to you ahead of time. Who is somebody that's been a part of your life or career that I could realistically interview for this podcast, and they'd have some great lessons or stories to talk about?
I thought about this, and I went through about 5 different people that I thought would be funny to sick you on for an interview.
Yeah, you can do multiple people. That's fine.
No, I've narrowed it down. I got one guy.
Okay.
And he's hugely influential. He was at my house yesterday. We were having a meeting. He's my business mentor. His name is Paul Burke.
Okay.
And I will send you his email. He will almost certainly be willing to do an interview. Paul is a guy who in the 70s he worked in the management for Kiss.
Okay.
And in the 80s he was doing all kinds of crazy weird things. He was in music and into distributing film soundtracks, and then in the 90s he was partners with Todd McFarlane, and he's one of the founders and executive vice presidents of McFarlane Toys, which turned into the kind of the name in the block in the toy business. And this guy's just done everything. And after that he formed a tier 1 car company, with contracts into Ford, and then that ended up going away. I mean, he's made a fortune, lost a fortune, made a fortune, lost a fortune. He's like a pure dyed in the wool, old school entrepreneur. Like, let's make this happen. What kind of dumb idea do you have? Can we make it work? Guy. And he's really fun to talk to. He's got insane stories. He's the only person, no shit, he's the only person I've ever seen pull out a cell phone and call Stanley.
Oh, damn.
This guy, he's crazy. I one time was like, I had all these questions. I'm trying to put together this investment brief, and I'm like, I need, somebody who really knows this stuff to look this over for you. Next thing I know, he's got like the retired CFO of the Tropicana company. I've got a meeting with him. He's gonna help me straighten out some of the numbers on this investment brief. Like, the guy he's been around for so long and done so many different types of distribution and manufacturing, from toys to music to movies to whatever it is. He's really interesting, full of insane stories. And I think that he'd be different. I think he'd be a lot different, because he's very much plugged into the entertainment industry, but he's not an entertainer.
Right.
He's the guy who figures out how to make money on what entertainers are doing. And it's worth interviewing.
Wow, that sounds amazing. Sounds like an amazing guy to interview.
Once you, if you've been hanging around, you probably have met him. He's, he's kind of an older guy. He's real skinny, tall.
Okay.
Kind of like lopes around. And like every single time he sees me, every time I pick up the phone, how you doing, Travis? Got this like Eeyore voice. Never gets excited about anything. Just, it'll be how it goes. It's awesome.
Oh, that's great, man. It's great. All right, Trav, it's been good chatting with you. Thanks for doing the podcast. And before we get out of here, where can people go online to get more information about you and everything going on with Source Point Press?
We're easy to find. We're on all the major social media under SourcePoint Press. I think Twitter is the only one that's different, at sourceptpress.com, or at sourceptpress, yeah. But otherwise, it's SourcePoint Press. We're on, Facebook, Instagram, all that stuff. As for me personally, I'm Travis McIntire. Easy to find on Facebook, at TMcIntire1 on Twitter, or come to virtually any convention that is near you, and chances are we will be there in one form or another.
And he's telling the truth on that.
I'm telling the truth. Yeah. If we're not there, then send me a message and let me know, and we'll try to be there.
All right, great. All right, man. It's good. It's been good chatting with you, man. Thanks for being on the podcast.
Thank you for taking the time. It was fun.
So that was my interview with Travis McIntire, the editor-in-chief of SourcePoint Press. For more information about all the great titles that SourcePoint Press is going to be working on in 2019, along with everything from their past and their future and their present, you can always go to sourcepointpress.com. There's more information, more links to all their social media in the show notes for this episode at freshasthepodcast.com, along with more information on where you can help contribute to the Hope Kickstarter from SourcePoint Press, along with Dirk Manning and Caitlin Smith, also in the show notes for this episode. Another great episode in the books. We got some great guests coming up. So thank you for listening. Goodbye and good night.
Fresh is the word.